At InDigital, we know the public safety professionals hold themselves to a high standard. In fact, standard doesn't do it justice. In over 25 years working alongside you, carrying millions of calls over our IP networks, your dedication has inspired us. That's why our ESI Net goes beyond industry standards, not only I3 compliant, but designed to adapt to future development for a network you can count on when it matters most. Learn more at indigital.net.
Here in Greenville County, we have 8 different places where a 911 call can be answered.
It is the largest county in South Carolina. It's a challenge.
The type of information that a telecommunicator gets from Radius Plus is location-based technology. You can see where the caller is, if they have a medical issue, if they speak a different language. They're immediately able to text to that caller in their native language. It reduces response times because it immediately gets first responders where they need to be.
If Within the Trenches has ever taught you something, open your eyes to what it is like to be a 911 dispatcher, or has inspired you to become one, then help support us and join our Patreon. Get exclusive bonus content, one-of-a-kind swag, discounts on merchandise, ad-free early access to new episodes, and much more. To join, please visit patreon.com/WTT podcast. And if you're an industry partner, we have something for you as well. And now, for the show.
This is Jordan, and you're listening to the Code 7 Podcast Network.
Warning. This episode contains the 3 A's of podcasting: adult content, adult language, and awesomeness. You've been warned.
Welcome to Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them.
Hey, what's going on? This is Ricardo with the Code 7 Podcast Network, and this is Within the Trenches, true stories from the 911 dispatchers who live them. This episode is sponsored by InDigital as well as Rapid Deploy and Carbine, and as always, a big shout out to patrons. Thank you so much for everything. I wouldn't be able to do everything I do if it wasn't for all of you, especially those here who are watching, listening, sharing, and supporting. So thank you so very much. And new content is going to be coming out. There are audio episodes of the DRT, the Dispatchers Roundtable, as well as open mic, and those go out to patrons only. Those are perks that they end up getting for being patrons of the podcast. The video episodes are out there all over social media. However, the audio versions of those, again, are for patrons only. So again, thank you, patrons. And also, new episodes of Singing Badly in My Car have gone out. One of the most recent ones was with my mom and my sister. We're driving and singing to Dynamite by BTS. So that one was a lot of fun. If you're a patron, you know what I'm talking about. The teaser has been out there for a little while now, so make sure to check that out as well. And just so much stuff in general that's going to be coming up. A lot of episodes that are coming up, as well as all of the live broadcasts. So make sure to stay tuned for all of that. So my guest today is Julie Buckingham, and she is the program director with RQI.
Hi there.
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
So this is going to be fun. You and I were already, before we started recording here, talking and laughing, and all I could think as we were laughing and talking about this was that, we could have been coworkers. Like it would have been a lot of fun. We've got some similar experiences here, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about you as well.
Thank you. I'm excited for the conversation.
This is going to be excellent. We've been talking actually back and forth for a little while now, whether it be in-person conferences or through email. Also, RQI was a sponsor for Dare to Be Great 3. And then we most recently saw each other, was it in Vegas? Or which one was it?
Yeah, it was at Navigator.
Okay.
And then at Nina also. Very briefly.
That's right. Yeah. Oh man, yeah. Navigator was busy, but then
Hmm.
you get to Nina, and that one was even more busy.
Yeah.
There were so many people there that I usually say hello to and spend a little more time with, especially in the expo hall, that I did not get a chance to do that with anyone. And a lot of people were sending messages saying, "When are we going to get together and say hello or take a picture?" I was like, "We walked right by each other, but we were busy as hell, all of us, and everyone's
Right.
booth was just going and
Yeah.
going." And it was a good time. How was the traffic there for you all?
It was good. I think we were all just really excited to get out of our house and
Hmm.
be able to be with people again physically. And so it was to me, it was a great experience and was just another indication that we're slowly starting to get back to some normalcy.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think along with that, there was talk that the attendance was almost double of what the last one was, because I think, just like because of what you said, people are ready to get back out and learn. And there's the classes were just amazing, the speakers and just
Yeah.
everything going on in the vendor hall. There was just so much for people to take in and to learn. And where I was sitting, Nine Wonder Women Inc., we were sharing a
Hmm.
booth.
Yeah.
We were right by the Innovation Theater. And
Yes.
so there's people all over the place. One of the funny things, though, was that we're sitting there and we're thinking, how, like, do they not know that the microphone isn't working? Like, we can't hear them, because usually you can hear them over like the system. And then someone walked by and they're like, no, they have earpieces. Like, everyone is sitting there listening to it right now. We're like, oh, I never felt
Yeah.
like I've never felt so dumb before.
I went to watch the canine demo because I train
Yeah.
dogs in a sport that's similar to canine work. So very interested in
Mhm.
and who doesn't love the dogs? And at the same time, like, mic's not working, but everyone seems to be okay with that. And I'm like, oh, that's right, the headsets.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we were the same way. It was hilarious, but it was really cool the way they did it
Mhm,
and everything. And for those who are watching and listening right now, if you have not had a chance to go to a national conference or even a state conference, try to do so. Dare to Be Great is out there. I'm toying with the idea of doing a fourth one because people keep saying that I should do it. So I'm thinking about it. The virtual events have been great, but it really does not compare to what you get, the networking alone,
mhm,
when you're there in person. So if you get a chance, please make sure to do that. I am doing scholarships as well, so you can do that as well. You might get one of those scholarships to be able to go to one of the national conferences. So, Julie, I want to learn more about you.
mhm.
How did you get into dispatching to begin with?
So it's kind of a roundabout way. Back when I was much younger, I was a paralegal and I worked in a law firm
Mhm.
that represented the Seattle Police Department in all of their civil cases. And so, as we know, you don't have to be right to sue. And the Seattle Police Department had a lot of civil cases against them, in particular at the time against their canine unit. And like I just mentioned, I trained dogs in a sport called Schutzen. It's now called IGP, and it tracking, protection, obedience, and it's a working dog sport.
Mhm.
So they thought it made sense that when the canine officers needed to be interviewed for a case, instead of bringing them in on day shift, let's just send Julie out at night and have her do a ride along with the unit, and she can do it from the car. So you're telling me I get to go out and hang out with working dogs? Okay, that sounds cool. So going out and seeing a different side of the law was incredible. You can
Mhm.
imagine what that ride along was like. On my first ride along, we got into a pursuit of a carjacking suspect that shot at us, and then crashed, and like it was insane. And I was like, you know what? I'm on the wrong side of this. I don't enjoy being in a cubicle. This is what I want to do. But
Mhm.
I also knew that I'm 5'1" and I had no desire to get my butt kicked. So I started exploring other ways and other
Mhm.
avenues of getting involved in law enforcement, ultimately public safety. So I wound up getting a position in a records unit at a police department at the south end of King County. And part of my training and onboarding, I had to go do a sit along in dispatch. And I went up to Valley Communications in Kent And I think that I was there for an hour and I already knew that I was going to be resigning from my records position at some point, that this is where I was meant to be. Everything about it, the way the call takers were able to really almost negotiate and manage these callers that were in various levels of hysterics and crisis. Like, I was blown away by how professional and skilled they were. And I fell in love. So went through application process at a couple of agencies. Hiring takes time, and Eastside Communications in Bellevue, which is on the east side of King County, was the first one that submitted an offer for hiring. So that is where I started my career in 1998.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's go back a little bit.
Mhm.
So there are not many people who can say, and this is before you're even in dispatch, but not a lot of people can say that they have been on a ride along and have something like that happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an interesting experience.
And so this is how I remember the experience. I remember the officer telling me, if they start shooting at us, get down. And I'm like, of course. Okay. And when they started shooting at us, I was on the floorboard of the car. I remember, I mean, I know I'm not remembering this right, but I remember my seatbelt still being seatbelted in. But surely I didn't slip out of it. But but I also remember that floorboard was burning hot because we had gone down the freeway at over 100 miles an hour for probably like 4 or 5 miles. That car was hot. And it was just such a crazy experience.
Wow.
Yeah. And when it was all said and done and he got back in the car and he was like, can we reschedule this interview? I'm like, yes, can I just go home?
Right. Or can I write about this? Like,
yeah, I had some good stories for the office the next day when I went in.
oh, geez. Yeah. Again, not a lot of people can say that. I've had, when I was in dispatch, I remember folks coming in to do a sit along, and they would ask me, some of the other things that happen once you get hired, and that's part of the training. And one of the things that I mentioned was the ride along,
Mhm.
and there are others that were in the room as well that I was working with that said, our ride-alongs were not that great, but I had some fun experiences. Like the one of the ones, we got to go lights and sirens up the highway to get to malicious destruction of property in progress. This was between two brothers that were fighting over the same, the one brother's wife. So they were fighting over her, and the guys in the back sitting with me, and at one point he says to me, he asks if I can open the door for him. And I said, no, man, like that can't happen. He's like, I want to tell my side of the story. And I said, well, you can speak to the officer when he comes in. But when he was first saying, hey, I was trying to ignore him. Like I was trying to pretend like I didn't hear him. But at first I thought, he can't be talking to me. I don't think he's talking to me. And then finally he's like, hey, you up there. But after I told him that I wasn't going to open the door, he starts like slamming his head on the plexiglass, and I'm just sitting there, and the deputy comes around and he's like, hey, he's like, settle down. And then his brother's out there and he's saying stuff to him too, and all I can think is like, this is real life right now. Like, this is what happens. Like, this is crazy.
So when I worked in my records position at that department, we got to go out on ride-alongs too, just as part of the job. And in that city, there were some places that even if they went to like an in progress DV or what have you, it was safer for you to be inside with the officer than to be alone in the patrol car out in the parking lot. And yeah, there were times that I would go into calls where, people just assume that you're one of the officers. And I'm not who you think I am. Talk to them. I can't help you.
Yes. So I had something similar happen with a canine officer that I was doing a ride along with. He goes, we got to go pick someone up. And I said, okay, just like, is this part of the ride along? Like, are they riding along too? And he's like, well, technically they are. It's like, oh, you got a warrant for somebody. And he goes, yeah. He goes, I'm gonna go pick somebody up. And he goes, do you want to be the one to arrest her? And I said, what? And he goes, I can make you a deputy right now. Like, I've got everything here. And I'm like, you can do that as a state trooper? and he's like, yeah, I can swear you in right here. It's like honorary. And I know he was messing with me, but we go in and he goes, I want you to stand right here by the door. And I said, okay. So I'm standing there. This couple walks out and the girl is there. She goes, okay. She knew that he was coming for her and stuff. But the guy that was there, the trooper goes, hey, he goes, don't get, don't get a pep in your step. My partner here will, he'll take you out. And I'm like, why would you tell him that? Like, they knew each other. So, yeah, so they were messing around, but I didn't know that at first. He didn't tell me until like later, but I thought, dude, I don't have a weapon or anything. like, like I have my fists. That's about it. And I will go down fighting, but it was very memorable to be able to do that. So that's why I like to talk about these as well, because there are not a lot of people out there who've had kind of experiences like this on a ride along, especially yours, where you are down on the floorboard and people are shooting. Like, what? That is nuts.
So crazy. Those ride-along experiences, though, from a training standpoint, were so important. And when I eventually moved over to dispatch, I didn't forget those experiences. I was watching how those officers prepared for their call before they even got there, and the questions that they were asking and the information that was important to them while they were en route. And I think that really helped me, especially when I got into my call taking training. I already came preloaded, understanding the picture that they needed to mentally see before they walked into that scene. And I don't know that, we have the ability to do ride-alongs as much anymore in some agencies, part of that because of staffing and other issues. But it is such an incredible and valuable experience.
Yeah, it definitely is. You get to learn both those sides. You also get to see some of the officers get annoyed with some questions or whatever, and you're just sitting there like, all right, note taken. I won't.
Right.
I'll leave that one out for you.
Oh, I see. So just because you hit en route doesn't mean we're really going just yet. Okay.
Right.
Noted.
Yeah. We're gonna finish our food here. Okay, I get it. Yeah. It was also the first time I had ever heard the term yard bird. I had never heard that before, and the deputy goes, you want to go eat, man? And I said, yeah. I said, we can go eat. And he goes, you want to get some yard bird? And I said, some yard bird? And I said, what? I said, you said yard bird, right? And he goes, yeah, like chicken, man. That's what I'm saying. I was like, oh, yeah, dude, I'm good with that. He goes, you're not from the farm like I am, are you? And I was like, no, man, sorry. Yeah, so many different things that you learn and you pick up along the way. So going into, like you said, you were preloaded already with a lot of the stuff that you needed to know going into dispatch. What was that training like? Because you were in records already, and you're getting that aspect of it as well. But then you do that sit along in dispatch, and you already knew that was something that you wanted to do. So now you get hired, you end up going in for training. Was it ever overwhelming, or were you just like, let's do this? Like you're just going and going.
So yeah, there were points for sure that it was overwhelming. And I was lucky the agency that I worked with had an incredibly well-structured training academy. We were 8 weeks in the classroom before we were out on the floor with our CTOs. And, everything related to law, that it was just second nature. I had no problem with that. But where I struggled with was fire and EMS calls because I didn't know nothing about any of that. And I had former nurses and an EMT that was transitioning into dispatch in my group, and they were so much smarter than me. At least I felt around that. And, that was, something that I was never comfortable with for a while I was in training.
Mhm.
But we got there.
What was it in training that you felt like you weren't? Was it just that it was the way they were training you, or and the reason I'm asking is because
Yeah.
when I was in training as well, at the central dispatch, we had four, no, three. We had three different trainers. It was four phases,
Hmm.
but one of the issues that I ran into was that I would learn with that first trainer, and once I moved to
Yeah.
the second one, if I wasn't doing it the way they were doing it, and I
Yeah.
was still doing it the way the other person was, I was kind of getting marked down a little bit. So it was confusing on how to do certain things. And then if I found out my own way that made it faster, then sometimes it made it even worse. So I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do.
Yeah, that was definitely a challenge. Monday and Tuesday with Terry, you do the job this way. Wednesday, Thursday, you do it this way when you're with Dave, because they do things differently and
Mhm.
their expectations were different. So you learn to be a little bit flexible around that. And, down the road in my career, when I became a training coordinator, that was something that I wanted to make sure that people didn't experience, that we had standardization and expectations around what needed to be done, but also giving people the ability to flex and to try things, because it's
Mhm.
not a black and white job. And I think that that's where I struggled in the very beginning around medical calls. Trainers like, just read your protocols. Okay. Well, sometimes the things people say or the circumstances don't fit within the confines of the protocols. And
Mhm.
I was almost scared to make a decision. And so when I got to the point where I freed myself to, that what you're doing, you got this, and you can navigate what's in front of you, it all went a lot better. Um, so, yeah.
Yeah, the protocols and everything that are there,
Hmm.
I fully agree that when you're going down some of those questions, the answers that are given, you're like, okay, we have seconds here,
Yeah.
like split seconds, and your answers are not fitting with what I'm trying to figure out here.
Right. Mhm.
So are you having trouble breathing or having chest pain or any of those main ones, so
Mhm,
we can go
mhm.
priority one? and
Right.
uh and then yeah, and then other times like, okay, I can you give me some more information because this isn't making sense.
Yeah.
The medicals, I could take um, domestic calls, any other phone calls like that, fight calls all day. Medicals were not my favorite. I did
Mhm.
well at them, of course, but they weren't my favorite. There were so many different variables with the medical calls as well, and you've got these protocols that you're using, and sometimes they just
Yeah.
it's a hard one to do.
Yeah. And, at our agency, even though we had, 14 fire departments, primarily, we were taking a lot more law enforcement calls than we were fire or EMS.
Mhm.
So the first call that I took after testing out and being released that day, the first call I took was a cardiac arrest call, which is ironic considering what I do now.
Right.
And it was the very first cardiac arrest call I ever took. And it freaked me out that the protocol algorithm to navigate that, we didn't spend a lot of time in that practicing it or in training. And now you're trying to navigate this complex algorithm. Meanwhile, you have someone pleading with you to help her save her husband. And to say that I felt lost in that moment was tough. It left an impression on me. We got through the call, of course, but I really kind of feared those calls going forward, because it wasn't a great experience for me. So
Yeah, those was it the situation, just the situation in general, or I mean, was it a combination of the screaming, the kind of feeling helpless a little bit there as well?
yeah,
I mean, I guess it could be a combination of many things, right?
yeah. And our protocol cards back in the day, it wasn't computerized like it is now,
Hmm.
and you had to visually navigate. If yes, go here. If no, go there. And I had maybe looked at that card a few times in training, and I had never had to do it on an actual call. So trying to manage my caller, verify the address in our old Tiburon CAD, and to navigate that card, it was so overwhelming. And I knew the gravity of that call.
Mhm.
I knew that I needed to act quick if we had any chance of saving that patient. And it was probably the toughest call that I took in that first year of my job.
It's funny how these types of calls happen right when you're done with training.
Right.
It seems to happen. A lot of people that I've spoken to, it happened to me. My first major call was a suicide. It was the night that I was going to be finally on my own after training. The chief didn't want to leave. I told him I'd be fine, and he goes to turn around to leave. And this was a walk-in police
Mhm.
department, and someone ran in saying that they had found their husband hung. So that that call was actually face to face with the caller right there.
Mm.
They had come right in. So what I thought would be my first 911 actual phone call, that emergency ended up being right in my face. So that was, that was my welcome to dispatch as well. So I can relate to you as going off on after testing out and everything, and then getting ready to go, and there you go, it's your first cardiac arrest. But how it has impacted you, because
Mhm.
of what you do now, which we'll get to here in a
Mhm.
little bit. But when you were done, when you finished up that call, I guess, what year was this? You said it was
Yeah.
98, right? Around
Yeah.
98, 99, something like that.
1998. Yeah.
Okay, so was there a debriefing or anything, or did anyone talk to you, or did you just go right to the next call? I mean, how did that work out? Because so I started
Mhm.
in 2001,
Mhm.
and when I started out, there was never any training or anything of saying, or even someone saying, you need to step away. There was nothing
Yeah.
like that.
No, it was certainly a different time back then, and I'm so glad that we've evolved as a profession
Hmm.
to where we are now. Because, and this isn't a knock against anyone that I worked with, because it was a great group of people. It was just the
Oh, of course.
culture.
Yeah, same. Hmm.
It wasn't safe to turn to the people in the room and be like, "That call sucked," or even ask the question, "Can you listen to this with me? What could I have done better?" I kind of struggled through that. You didn't expose yourself in that way
Hmm.
back then, where I think, hopefully, in our centers, it's safer to acknowledge when a call is bothering us. And I think that we can still do more around creating this kind of culture of excellence where people are looking for what can I do better, and creating a safe environment around people who are looking to improve.
So even early on with that specific call,
Mhm.
did you walk away with that same sense? Like, not so much, what could I have done better, but what am I going to do to prepare myself for more calls that are going to come in like that? The
Yeah.
reason I ask
Mhm.
is because I had taken a call,
Mhm.
and that one almost, like, it pretty much had me want to memorize all of those
Yep.
cards so that I could read it that much faster or say it that much faster, because I had it more in
Mhm.
memory
Mhm.
than looking for them and then reading and reading and reading and reading. So for me, it was memorization. Like, I'm not going to be that's slower or whatever. I'm going to do everything that I can to be able to get people out there as fast as possible, but also get their information as fast as possible.
Oh yeah. I was not gonna let that happen again. So you can bet I had my nose in that card and I had it memorized. I was not gonna be thrown by that card again. And same with the choking card and the delivery card, those cards that are more complex that we're not in very often. Um, I made sure that I was well schooled in those. And then when I would hear other people taking CPR calls in the room, if I wasn't on a call, I'd flip open my book and I would listen to what they're saying. I would follow along in the protocol where I thought they were going, and watching the call in CAD. And that helped a lot.
And here I thought I was the only one. I wonder how many people are watching this and listening to this who are thinking the same thing, because I would do the same thing. I would listen to a call, and it was very early on and sometimes later on when I was even more seasoned as a dispatcher, but I would listen to some of those calls early on and start going through them because they made me nervous. The medicals made me nervous, especially the choking one as well.
Hmm.
One of the choking calls I took, it was a mom calling in for her child that was choking, but all you can hear is her like slamming his back, and it in the on the card, it says to tell the person not to do that because it'll injure them or hurt them more than what already is going on. And I remember telling her this as we're going through all of this. I already had people heading out to her, and I remember her getting upset, and I mean, she was upset as it was already, but getting upset with me and saying, "What the f do you want me to do? Let him f and choke?" And I'm
Hmm.
like, "I'm gonna help you," just like, and we went through, and he ended up, coughing it up. We were able to get it up and out and stuff. And that after that, she was all thank you, and I'm
Hmm.
sorry. I'm like, hey, don't worry about it. You're in a moment that is of panic and everything. That's why I'm here. I'll take it if
Hmm.
I need to take it. Just
Hmm.
well, I'm just glad your kid's okay.
You know what I love though? Fast forward like 9, 10 years when I became a supervisor, and
Mhm.
being the junior supervisor, you're on graveyard, smaller group, more intimate environment for you. And it's not necessarily as busy as day shift with all the paper calls and so forth. And
Mhm.
one of the things that we would do is, if there was a crazy or an unusual call that came in, we would, debrief it, I would say, in the room. And it was really a group conversation. It's like, Brian, talk about that call. How did you know that that's what that was? And just, people would ask questions, and, he would, someone would offer up, oh, I wish I had asked that sooner, or I didn't think to ask that, I wish I had asked that. And we learn from one another. But it goes back to creating that safe environment that I felt I didn't have when I first started.
Mhm.
I wanted people to be able to look at what could I do better, and to come back and say, oh yeah, I should have done that, or I could have done that, not just to yourself but to your peers in the room. To me, that was rewarding from the standpoint that I felt like I had created a safe place for my people to
Mhm.
have that conversation. And that's how it should be, right? We should always be pushing ourselves and one another to, how can we do this just a little bit better next time?
Yeah, streamline it, right? To be more
Yeah.
efficient with everything that is going on. Now, when you ended up getting promoted to be supervisor, were you already doing the training as well, or was that after or before? How did that
Yeah.
work out?
No, I'd been a CTO,
Hmm.
but yeah, that was the extent of my training background. I did at that time. I was an instructor for the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission and the telecommunicator program,
Hmm.
so I had that experience as well. So training is something that I've always valued, and I've enjoyed. Like I said, I've been dog training for a really long time. Um, and obviously dogs and people are different, but the process of learning and working to improve, it's kind of the same thing. I enjoy that process and watching for those light bulb moments. Those are really rewarding for me.
So I guess it's safe to say that the stuff that you dealt with early on is what really inspired and motivated you to become a CTO as well as a supervisor. Then, right?
Yeah, and I had one incident in particular, June 22nd, 2002, that I think really shaped the majority of the rest of my career. And it was a Saturday. It was a crazy busy day, so busy that our lieutenants and captains who never went on calls were taking alarm calls and going on stuff that they got out from behind their desk that day. It was that crazy.
Hmm.
And um, I had it was one of those days where like your pending calls is just stacked. And I had a priority for assist official agency come in. And so, I'm putting out my progress, and I grabbed that and look at it. And it was a request from the sheriff's office to back one of their deputies who was going out to a report of a naked man in the intersection. And the intersection he was in, if he was on the south side of the intersection, it belonged to the sheriff. The north side belonged to us. He
Hmm.
just happened to be on the south side, and that's why it wasn't our primary. But I saw that and I'm like, oh my God, that's not a priority for a call. So immediately start getting units dispatched onto that. I get on the phone with the sheriff's office and let them know that, we're sending units, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden the board lit up. We had so many calls holding, like it went crazy. And the reason why it went crazy is this deputy got into a struggle with this naked man in the intersection who my department had had multiple encounters with, known drug users. We didn't know about excited delirium back in the day, but he certainly could have fit that bill, at least on one of our calls that we dealt with him. Officer loses his gun in the struggle, and as the officer's retreating, the guy shoots him. And when the officer goes down, the guy proceeds to execute him by unloading the gun into the officer's head in the intersection with the public and cars all around watching what's going on. And then he takes off and barricades in an apartment. And all that happened while I was on the line with dispatch for the sheriff's office. And it just, you can imagine what that turned into. And even though it wasn't my officer that was shot, it was our call that we were working together. It was my officers that were first on scene and that were responding. It was my fire department that was responding to that call. And it was insane. Just as what you would think. And there came a point where, in the incident where they got him in custody and the scene's being transitioned over to the sheriff's office, and our units are being cleared, and we've brought in another shift because our units needed to be taken off the streets. And so they all go into their hot wash debriefing, and I asked if I could go. And my supervisor called the lieutenant and asked, and the answer was no. So I wasn't even taken off the console. So now I'm going back to dispatching alarm calls and theft complaints and all of that. And I don't know how to describe it. I feel like shell-shocked is probably the word. I can't even describe how that felt. But when I went home that night, like, I have never cried like that before in my life, or probably since. And, going to work the next day, and it's not like everything's fine. And I remember talking to my supervisor about it. And she's like, well, let me see what I can do. And what they came back with was, talk to the lieutenant. And they said they're doing a debriefing of sorts for the spouses of the officers that were on that call in a few days. And they said that you can go to that. Like, I don't know that they really want to hear about how your husband was crying over the air and I was trying to calm him and keep him safe while we still had a guy with a gun on the balcony. And so it's like, okay, this is what it is. And you compartmentalize it, and you just go about your life. Where that shooting occurred, that was actually my way home. And it didn't occur to me that I have never driven that road again until I went to, I was a tactical dispatcher as well. I went to tactical dispatch conference down in California. Mm-hmm. And one of the sessions was around critical incidents. And so go into the session, you go into this room, and there's incense burning. There's a woman with a guitar in a chair playing and humming and swaying. I'm like, what did I just walk into? It was very kumbaya, but everyone else seemed okay with it. And it seemed like they knew her, and it was clear that she was liked and respected. Mm-hmm. And she was a critical incident counselor in the Bay Area. So they knew who she was. And so I was in this session with dispatchers from like Oakland, LAPD, agencies where, the crap happens all the time. And so people were going around the room and talking about, their critical incidents. And when it came to me, I'm like, I don't really have anything to share. The agency that I worked for is on the east side of King County. It's a pretty affluent area. Bill Gates lived in my response area.
Oh, wow.
So, nothing horrible happens in that jurisdiction like it does in places like Oakland. So I'm like, I don't really have anything. And somehow she got me back to the point of that call. And even though it was 3 years previous, I was able to tell her not just what I was wearing, what everyone else in the room was wearing, exactly where people were positioned. I could visualize my screen and almost read what was on my screen. The incident had left such a mental mark on me that I could recreate that day over and over. And she got me talking. And it didn't occur to me that I had never driven that road since, that some of my behaviors, the way that I would react to things, like, a few months later, we had another report of a naked man running down one of the main streets in our city. And the officers were joking about it over the radio and kind of making light of it. And I ripped him a new one over the radio. I'm pretty even tempered, but I got angry. I was so angry that they were minimizing the seriousness of this call. I didn't know what it meant to be triggered. I now understand that. And that kind of started a journey for me. And, I'm now really aware of the things that trigger me. Even, so back in 2010, we had an officer in Seattle that was executed in his patrol car. And the dispatcher that took that call was in one of my classes that I was teaching at the academy. And it was only 2 weeks post-incident. And I could tell that she was still pretty disturbed. And really, she probably shouldn't have been there. And we were having a conversation about critical incidents in this portion of the class. And someone made the comment about how, sometimes you just got to build a bridge and get over it. And her presence and seeing what she was going through and recognizing that from myself, just her presence was a trigger for me. I jumped in that poor kid's butt for making a statement like that. Mm-hmm. And I stepped away from the class and I apologized to him later. But now I understand there are things that will cause me to react in a way that I wouldn't normally. So all of that to say that, when I became a supervisor and through the rest of my career, peer support and creating a safe place for people to share their experiences became important to me. And, I would take people off consoles if, there was a really bad call and I could see that they were bothered. Of course, no one ever wants to leave their console.
Of course.
Like, if you really don't want to go, I'm not going to make you. But this is for me. I want you to step away just for 5 minutes and take a breath. I want you to have that space. So I'm glad that we've evolved as a profession in how we're treated in these incidences, because mental health matters, right? And that wasn't a consideration back then.
Yeah, it's good that you were able to to do this and to be able to build that culture as well. There were a lot of times that we would have incidents when I was in dispatch too, and we were never invited to those debriefings, and we always wondered why. But then the one time that we're invited over there, I remember we're all like, okay, what do we need to go there for? but then we all went. And I think it's because of the fact that we had been thrown to the side so many times that we just kind of thought, well, we're going to go there and they're not going to care anyway. But we made our voices known. This wasn't it wasn't a big incident that happened. This was a festival that we were running, and we had gone there to debrief from that weekend on everything that had happened. And there were a lot of fights that were going on there and stuff, but we had everything set up the way it just needed to be in dispatch to run smoothly for those that were out over there doing dispatch and running different stuff, and for the officers and wreckers. But it was I remember when we were there and going over all of these incidents, I spoke up and a few others on my team spoke up. And I remember some of the folks there saying, how come we don't have them here more often? Like, we didn't know about that or that side of it. And I remember us looking at each other and we're just like, yeah, like, why don't you have us here more? Because we add a whole other aspect to it that they have no idea about.
Yeah. As supervisors and people who are responsible for the well-being of the people under us, it's not always it doesn't have to be a big incident that creates the trigger for someone. Mm-hmm. And, I would have employees like, I don't know why that call is bothering me. And it maybe wasn't that call on its own. It's a collection of things. And so I love corny analogies and metaphors. And to me, it's like, putting a vase under a faucet that has a drip. Eventually, if you don't empty out that vase, it's going to overflow, you know? And so it's these collection of experiences, and we just don't have a real healthy outlet always for relieving that stress and pressure. You know, we're working 12+ hour days. We've got an hour commute, you know, home and then back to work. We got to deal with stuff at home. You know, we're over, you know, time assigned to the max, and we just, you know, mentally don't have that space to decompress.
Right.
And it creates a tough situation around resiliency.
What was your self-care like back then?
Not very good.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, not not very good. Sleeping, you know, a lot. Being grumpy with people a lot. I never really drank, just because, you know, I came from a family where my parents were alcoholics, so that was not a road that I was going to go down. But I could see, you know, it's not that I didn't think about it sometimes. But yeah, it was almost kind of like a depressive state, you know, stopped going out with my friends, you know, especially friends that weren't in the business, because, you know, it was kind of offensive how happy they were, you know, and how carefree they were. It's like, do you know what just happened?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's, again, we're just having, you know, self-awareness that, you know, I'm sleeping more, you know, I'm kind of closing myself off, you know, that things aren't right, you know. So I started to learn to pay attention to me and what's going on, and being okay, saying things aren't okay with me right now.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, it was the last 2 years of my dispatch career that I really got into, you know, like meditation and yoga and such like that. And I wish I would have known that, or at least given it a chance earlier, because those last couple of years, plus I started writing about my
Hmm.
calls, and then started the podcast as well.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
all of that stuff was therapeutic for me, and made everything so much better. But
Yeah.
it took a lot of me looking in the mirror as well, and, you know, noticing that I'm the issue, which is something we don't always want to admit, right? We don't
Right.
want to admit that it's us. And just, you know, trying to figure out something different for myself, because it's going to not only make it better for me, but for everyone who I come in contact with as well.
Yes.
So we've gone through, you know, your story here, which is amazing. I mean, the ride along alone is is awesome. But I want to, you've made this transition now. So you were, let's say you were in dispatch. How long were you in dispatch for?
For 15 years. So my agency that I started with, Eastside Communications, belonged to the Bellevue Police Department.
Hmm.
And at some point, the agencies in the area decided they wanted to, you know, stand up their own center. So in 2009, NORCOM was formed, which brought in the Eastside Communications Group and the Kirkland Police Group. So when I transitioned over to NORCOM, I had applied to be the training coordinator. I said I always had an interest in training, and so this was an amazing opportunity to build from scratch a training program. And so it was a phenomenal job, and I was in that position for 3.5 years. But it was an all-consuming job, just from the hour standpoint. 60+ hours was the norm, and the thing that caused me to leave dispatch was really my daughter. And it was one night in particular in the office. It was a little bit later at night, and I was still working after coming home, which was normal. And I turned around to go get something off of the credenza, and I hadn't realized, but she was on the floor next to me sleeping. And so I woke her up, like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "I just wanted to be with you and spend time with you." I was like, "Oh my gosh." And I took a picture of her when I turned around and saw her, because she looked so cute before she
Hmm.
broke my heart.
Yeah.
And it still pops up on my Facebook memories every year at that time. And, you know, I shared, you know, that was the moment my career path changed. And so I knew that I needed to make a change for her. Her dad was a detective who worked a lot. He was in narcotics at the time. I was working a lot. It's like, what is going, we're not creating a good situation for her. So I started exploring opportunities, and one that had come up at the time was to be the EMD QI program manager at King County EMS Medic One. So they oversaw all of our EMD protocol training and QI compliance and so forth. So I put in for that, and I got that position, and I was actually there for 5 years. But what was really cool is it opened another opportunity for me and revealed to me a passion that I didn't know that I had. And that was being able to work with the Seattle King County Resuscitation Academy. So Seattle and King County in general has been kind of the beacon of resuscitation excellence in the world for a very long time. And people come to our area to learn from us, to see what can they do in their systems to improve cardiac arrest survival. So at the time, my supervisor at King County was the person who would give a talk about telecommunicators and TCPR and all that. But her background really wasn't dispatch, and she was retiring soon and she didn't want to do it anymore. So she's like, hey, you just came from dispatch and you like public speaking. Can you just do this for me? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I give this presentation, and it was her presentation. But as I'm sitting in this resuscitation academy, I'm hearing things about quality of resuscitation and how these little things that we do or don't do ultimately impact whether someone may live or die. And it got me really reflective about the things that we're doing in dispatch. And again, always looking at how can we be a little bit better, and recognizing that in some cases, maybe people are living in spite of what we're doing, not because of what we're doing, and that there was an opportunity to get better. So that started for me in 2012. And it really turned into my passion that we can save more people if we start treating telecommunicators as first responders and improving the quality of resuscitation a patient receives prior to EMS arrival. And I was very fortunate. A series of lucky events in the course of my life that have gotten me to where I am. So the Seattle King County Resuscitation Academy has always been supported by the American Heart Association and Laerdal Medical. In about 2017, AHA and Laerdal came to the RA faculty and said, still too many people are dying from out of hospital cardiac arrest, and we want to look at how can we operationalize the things that you're talking about as best practices and so forth. And they recognized in particular that, we do so much training around bystanders and their CPR competency. Millions of bystanders trained every year in CPR. And of course, EMTs and paramedics get, their own resuscitation credentials and, tons of practice on CPR mannequins. It's really a focus of their job. But nothing happens in dispatch. We have our initial EMD basic. Of course, we've got our protocol cards, but we're really the neglected first responders in that chain of survival. So they asked the question, how can we do better? And as a result of that, a couple of things happened. The AHA telecommunicators CPR programmatic and performance recommendations were published. That's now their position statement paper. They publicly came out and supported the reclassification of telecommunicators. And they started looking at where's the training gap and where's the skills gap with telecommunicators. So I was really lucky being in a position to be a subject matter expert consulting on that work through my association with the Seattle King County Resuscitation Academy. But as they were building out what ultimately became the RQI telecommunicator program, it occurred to me that this program may someday be taken over by someone who doesn't come from dispatch and doesn't have the passion for it that I do. And that concerned me. So it felt like jumping off a massive cliff, but I left 20 years of government service to go into the private sector to continue to build and now manage this program. And it was one of the hardest decisions I ever made, but really is probably the best decision I ever made, because every day I get to live my passion.
When you were taking that time to make this hard decision, Did you ever reflect back to that first call when you had tested out in that cardiac arrest?
Yeah, so the things that have happened to me in my career that I have said I don't want to have happen to anyone else
Mm-hmm.
absolutely drives everything that I do. Even today in this environment and with this program, creating a safe space for people to learn and receive feedback on how they can be better, not what you did wrong, but how can we be better, and recognizing our skills as first responders and valuing us as first responders and the role that we play. We're more than just a voice on the other side of the phone or the radio. We are active in providing patient care, and we need to be valued and respected in that role. Not have our role minimized and being invited to the spouse debriefing type of thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So in of course, if you're able to talk about this too, but what are some ways that with this program and everything, what are some ways the dispatch can improve on resuscitation, on when we're taking these calls? There's protocol and everything, but we had a conversation yesterday as well. You can go through the
Mhm.
protocol and do everything that's there, but there are some questions, right? You kind of mentioned some questions that are unnecessary during that
Mhm.
time, and it breaks up the process of CPR. What are other ways, or I mean, how do you all put it out there? What are the ways that the dispatch can improve, and what it
Yeah.
is that they're already doing?
One of the challenges with these calls, it's only about 1% of the calls that we take. So it's most certainly a low frequency, but
Hmm.
the ultimate high risk call that we take. And, part of the challenge with that is that we don't become highly proficient at them simply through the simple act of exposure, like with, chest pain or seizure calls, right? So we need to focus more on improving the knowledge and the skills of telecommunicators as it relates to resuscitation. EMD basic is just the beginning. It's about more than just reading your protocol cards, because like we said, people don't always give yes and no answers to yes and no questions.
Hmm.
So what do you do with that? What do you do in those times where maybe are they in cardiac arrest or are they just unconscious? Well, when in doubt, there is no doubt. We should be doing CPR on those patients. But have we created a safe environment for telecommunicators that if it's a false positive and it turns out as soon as we start doing chest compressions that patient's like, stop.
Right.
That we don't have situations where EMS is calling, why'd you send us on that call? It was just an unconscious patient.
Hmm.
Well, because we're doing blind telemedicine, friend. And sometimes that's really hard. So by creating an environment where we can focus on those skills and those challenges that we know exist around resuscitation, it improves our ability to accurately identify when a patient is in cardiac arrest and do it more quickly. And it's about more than just getting CPR started within 120 seconds or meeting a performance time. Poor quality CPR kills patients, and I don't think that we put enough focus around that. So that's one of the things that we really try to educate our program participants in, is the impact that the coaching that they provide to the lay rescuer has ultimately on survival.
Hmm.
You're not taking a call, you're treating a patient. As a first responder, that is your patient until they're handed off to the first field unit that arrives on scene. So you're responsible to ensure that compression rate is where it should be, which is between 100 and 120 compressions per minute. When it's below that or over that, survival actually decreases by about 50%. So it's about more than just reading the line in your protocols about instructing the caller on compression rate. It's about making sure that they actually do it and that you're supporting them to be able to do it. So those are the things where we can start making incremental improvements in how we're able to manage these calls. That's where we're going to start to see really important and significant improvements in outcomes. And I always tell fire chiefs and medical directors when I have an opportunity to speak with them, EMS can't save a patient until dispatch has made them savable first. It's It's science. It's not possible.
Mhm.
Survival decreases by about 10% for every minute that CPR is not performed. And CPR alone doesn't save a patient, but it keeps the patient viable by circulating oxygenated blood to the heart and the brain. That means that when EMS arrives on scene, they have a patient that they can actually work on. They have a viable patient. So the average response time for EMS in this country is between 6.5 to 7 minutes in the urban areas. And we know in the rural areas, it can be double, sometimes triple that. So
Right.
we're really that patient's only chance of survival. But we don't spend enough time focusing on our skills around this. And that's what our program works to improve.
See, and that's really good because just listening to you say this, and I gonna inject a little humor here, but it makes me think of and I don't know if you had this issue when you were dispatching still, but the TTY.
Mhm.
You have to test that once or twice a month, right?
Yeah.
And then when you get to that point where you're going to test it, no one knows how to use the damn thing. And because we don't do it enough, but reading through the directions, you get it real easy, and it's like that. But just thinking about it, it's like, oh wait, what? Like, and because no one really uses a TTY either. Like in
Right.
our county, I think there was maybe one person who we had at least listed that was able to use it, and like I said, we were always testing it, but it was still, because you're only testing that once or twice a month. When it comes to it, sometimes then you're in the book reading through, and you're like, okay, we got this. But it's those little seconds, right, that
Mhm.
that count. So that's why I compare this a little bit. It's not exactly the same, but I mean, the situation, like you're saying, we don't practice it enough. There's only certain amount of cardiac arrests that end up coming in.
When we talked before about the reclassification effort, and it's not enough just to give us a first responder title. There's more to it than that. And even as a profession, we need to ask, what does it mean to be a first responder? And when
Mhm.
you look at the other public safety sectors, fire, EMS, law enforcement, they are practicing those skills that they don't use frequently, but are critical when it comes to saving or preserving life. So you do frequently see your EMTs and paramedics practicing on their mannequins, their CPR
Mhm.
skills, because it's not enough to be good. You need to be highly proficient in those skills to have impact. But we're not afforded those same opportunities, and we're not demanding them for ourselves either. Um, so I think that there's a lot of opportunity for us to really, walk the talk of what it means to be a first responder.
Perfect. Now, as we go into the wrap up of this episode,
Mhm.
this has been awesome to have you on, learn more about you as well as this program, and everything that you do with it. Um, if you could go back in time and visit yourself, what would you tell yourself in dispatch? If you could go back for everything that you know now, and you could go back and talk to yourself, what would you tell yourself?
Be nicer to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not be so critical of yourself. And find that job sooner. It,
Excellent.
it's such a rewarding and amazing profession. It is not a job, it is a profession, and it's one that I encourage so many people to pursue. You get to help people in such a real and meaningful way. And like I said, no one's trying to beat you up or throw up on you. And
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Um, where can people find more information about RQI, and also for you? If anybody ever wanted to reach out to you, is that information on a website somewhere? How can people find out more?
Yeah, so the company I work for is called RQI Partners. RQI stands for Resuscitation Quality Improvement. We are the American Heart Association and Laerdal Medical. We're just a group that focuses on resuscitation competency from those organizations. And our website is rqipartners.com, and my email address is julie.buckingham@rqipartners.com.
All
And you can
right.
find me on LinkedIn, pretty active on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. Now, before we go out here, there's also a webinar that you have coming up as well, correct?
Correct. We have a webinar, a roundtable webinar on November. It is, oh my goodness. November 10th. Yes, November 10th. Through Nina. Nina's hosting that for us, and that will be at 10 o'clock Pacific time, where we're going to talk about the challenges that we have when it comes to saving more lives from cardiac arrest and some of the success stories some of our partners have had, and what's the pathway forward for us to build these strong and resilient systems that someday when someone that we love and care about, or even ourselves, has a cardiac arrest, that we've built a system where we've created the opportunity for them to survive that arrest, because cardiac arrest does not have to be a death sentence. We can save more people than what we are now.
Excellent. Thank you again so much for being
thank
on.
you.
And this has been awesome. I look forward to doing more.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll have to
Thank
do a
you.
roundtable on this. Yeah, this is going to be excellent.
Okay.
I will be right back here with you. And for those who are watching and listening, if you have any comments or questions, or you want to be a guest on the show, you can email us, and that's going to be wttpodcast@gmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter. That is @91podcast. You can like us on Facebook. That is facebook.com/Within the Trenches podcast. If you're looking for any bonus content, you can also check us out and support us at patreon.com/WTT podcast. This episode has been sponsored by In Digital, as well as Rapid Deploy and Carbine. And once again, as always, big shout out to the patrons. This can be seen on Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as YouTube. And you can listen 24/7 on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, your favorite podcasting app, and withinthetrenches.net. Have a good one, everyone. And we'll see you in the next one.